year 1964 is known for civil rights activists, racial groups, and political strife. The Democrats were in control of the Senate and the House of Representatives. As the election year was coming to an end, the Senate and the House of Representatives were taking a more affirmative action towards getting civil rights for Black Americans. One man took an active stand to fight for civil rights equality. Malcolm X was his name. Malcolm X was destined to become a civil rights activist. He was born May 19, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska, originally Malcolm Little. His father, Earl Little, an outspoken Baptist minister and civil rights activist. Before Malcolm X was 4 years old, the family had moved twice because of death threats by the Black Legion. The Black Legion was a racist group sworn to secrecy, much the same as the Ku Klux Klan. In 1929, the Littles' house was burned to the ground. Just 2 years later, Earl Little was found dead lying on trolley tracks. Both incidents were ruled accidents by local police. However, the family suspected the infamous Black Legion. Lewis Little, Malcolm X's mother, never recovered from the attacks and suffered a mental breakdown. Malcolm and his siblings were soon split and put into foster care. Malcolm X's childhood was full of trouble. He dropped out of school and was soon caught in a ring of drugs, prostitution, and gambling. In 1946, Malcolm X was arrested on accounts of burglary and sentenced to 7 years in prison. Upon being in prison, Malcolm X chose to further his education and converted from a Baptist to a Muslim. At this time, he discarded the old name Little, for which he thought was a slave name, and took an X for his last name. In 1964, Malcolm took a life-altering pilgrimage to Saudi Arabia. He then began to spread the words and ideas with different communities. The communities responded positively, and soon Malcolm X gained the confidence to return to the United States to spread his ideas about civil rights. Today, we will first explain why we chose Malcolm X for our speaker. Next, we will talk about why he inspires us. Then we'll give an analysis on Malcolm X's famous 1964 speech entitled "The Ballot or the Bullet." And finally, we will talk about the significance of that speech.
We chose Malcolm X because he was a powerful and important figure during a historical time in recent American history. He was an influential spokesperson in the 1960s and an activist for civil rights. The 1960s were a poignant time in history with war, women's rights, drugs, freedom of speech, civil rights. Things were really crazy back then, and everyone seemed to be floating in some sort of limbo, trying to figure out something about their life that broke all barriers of what was considered the norm. His attitude toward life was much different than fellow civil rights activist Martin Luther King. His attitude is best reflected in the song by Bob Marley, "Get Up, Stand Up." He was about action. As stated by Malcolm X, "I am for violence if nonviolence means we continue postponing a solution to the American black man's problem just to avoid violence."
It is difficult not to be moved by a speech about the trials involved in fighting for one's basic human rights. Like most of the civil rights speakers, Malcolm X was of course inspiring and motivating, but he was different. Who would have thought that this black man, a junior high school dropout, imprisoned for his petty criminal acts, whom without any history of proper education, be one of the main reasons as to why Obama stands as a president today? To Malcolm X, it wasn't that you needed a significant amount of college degrees and expertise to be able to take a stand and fight. Rather, it was being an African American and experiencing the hardships of what a black man had to go through that helped deliver his speeches with strength and courage. According to Malcolm himself, "I am not educated, nor am I an expert in any particular field. But I am sincere, and my sincerity is my credential." He was a born leader, and it was his charisma, drive, vivid personality, and conviction that allowed him to become a magnet and capture every person's attention.
The Ballad of the Bullet was delivered on April 12, 1964 in Detroit, Michigan. Malcolm X developed the Ballad or the Bullet because he was frustrated by the American government's lack of activity concerning civil rights movements. Malcolm X used logic or logos to argue that the American government was not doing enough to create civil rights equalities. He said, "It is in this present administration, they have in the House of Representatives 257 Democrats to only 177 Republicans. They control 2/3 of the House vote. Why can't they pass something that will help you and me? In the Senate, there are 67 senators who are on the Democratic Party, only 33 of them Republicans. And what have they given it for you? 4 years in office and just now getting around to some civil rights legislation." Malcolm X used these statistics to argue that change was required in American government to press the legislative leaders to address civil rights. The use of statistical information to prove his point demonstrated logos. By using actual figures of the numbers of Democrats and Republicans in the legislative body, Malcolm X illustrated the need of change of legislative personnel through a rational perspective. The idea of change in American government was expressed by many African Americans during the 1960s. Malcolm X built credibility or ethos in the speech by mentioning the names of Martin Luther King, Adam Clayton Powell, and Reverend Gallinson. These three men were known for their activities concerning civil rights and desegregation. Powell, Gallinson, and King were all ministers in their respective religions. Powell was an Absentine Baptist minister and prominent congressman fighting for civil rights equalities. Reverend Gallinson was a minister in the Silhome Presbyterian Church, one of the most respected black churches in Brooklyn. King was a Baptist pastor and Malcolm X was a black Muslim minister. He established his credibility by comparing himself to these prominent men and as a fellow minister. By mentioning these men, Malcolm X used a base for which he could speak his ideas to a listening crowd. Although Malcolm X used his ministerial background as a basis of credibility, he also made an effort not to make his speeches about converting to his religion. He said, "Although I'm still a Muslim, I am not here tonight to discuss my religion. I am not here to try to change your religion." By eliminating the idea of converting to a Muslim religion in the speech, Malcolm X expressed his ideas of a change in governmental workings to the public. The public could listen to Malcolm X without defending their religious views. Malcolm X built ethos by being an African American, by living the same experiences as his listeners. Malcolm X established a motive as to why he claimed there needed to be change considering civil rights and the black community. This required great courage, that there were many anti-civil rights groups and other individuals who hurt or killed anyone who was pro-civil rights. When Malcolm X spoke, others listened to him because he had the strength to stand up and fight for civil rights. Malcolm X's target audience included men and women of America that wanted civil rights equality. Because of the strength of his speeches, his audience responded to him. Some of the audience's reactions or pathos were of laughter. He made points and jests at various political groups to keep the audience interested. He said, "I'm not going to sit at your table and watch you eat with nothing on my plate and call myself a diner." The audience laughed at this point in the Ballad or the Bullet speech because they are sharing in a common joke as to what has been done on the path to civil rights.
The significance of Malcolm X's speech is clear. Times were changing for Americans, especially African Americans, and he rallied and called for action. Malcolm X was one of the most prominent civil rights activists of the 1960s. The immediate effects of Malcolm X's speech included creating a motivation to continue on to the fight for civil rights. Others followed him to start civil rights movements of their own. As noted by Malcolm X, there was no better than adversity. Every defeat, every heartbreak, every loss contains its own seed, its own lesson on how to improve your performance the next time. Another effect that occurred was a motivation for Black Americans to vote. If African Americans